Hi everyone, and welcome back to Waterhouse Forde. As we said in our last video, today we're going to have a look at the rocker arm and just get that cleaned up and ready to go back onto the cylinder head. We'll bring you over in a minute. We'll show you what it looks like at the moment, and we'll talk a little bit about the things that you want to kind of look for and the things to do to make sure that it's working as good as possible. So yeah, we'll get started with that. We'll get ourselves set up and then we'll get going. Okay, so what we've got here, this is the rocker arm. We've got it essentially upside down at the moment, and the reason for that is I wanted to show you it very clearly. You've got one hole here, which is a lubrication hole. Okay, so this is where the oil comes up from the oil pump essentially, and it goes through that channel and it feeds into each of these, basically all along this pipe in the middle, and lubricates each of these rocker arms. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that we want to talk about, so the important thing is this is number, if you look on the engine, if you look on this on the cylinder head, you'll find that corresponding hole at cylinder number 4.
Okay.
Okay? So we know this is the back of the engine and that's the front of the engine. Okay. Now the other thing that we want to look for is, if you look on here, we've got two basically wearing faces. Well, not wearing faces, but hardened faces. Okay. So this one, the back one, runs on the push rod that's coming up from the camshaft, and these front lobes basically push down on the valve itself.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and of course you set your tappets. The clearance of your tappets is basically the clearance between this surface here. Well, it's between these two surfaces and either the rocker arm, the push rod, or the valve face. But you measure it on the valve face and you adjust it on the push rod side. Okay. So if we turn this over quickly back to the way we're perhaps accustomed to seeing it, which is like this. Now what you've got, these are called pillars, right? So your 4 pillars, and they are what essentially bolt down onto the cylinder head. This is each of these is a rocker arm. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you see in between you've got springs, and they basically keep tension on the rocker arms. But also you can see that your rocker arms can move, right?
Yeah.
So you can see there's a lot of dirt in there.
Yeah.
So ideally what we want to do is get these end caps off, or get at least one of them off, and then we can pull each of these off. Now we can clean the rod. Also, if you look here on some of them, we've got a bush as well. And we can check those bushes and make sure that they're okay. Now what they've done, now often these caps are held on with a split pin, but in this case they're actually there's basically a pressed pin in there. You can just see it. You see there's a little circle. That's a pressed pin. So basically they press the pin in and then they knurl it over. So that's going to make it a little bit more difficult to get off. Obviously it was just a split pin, then we can just pop the split pin off and off we go. But anyway, we'll have to knock that out with a punch, which we'll do in a minute. But the thing I wanted to show you, so what are the things that we want to do? First thing, we want to make sure all of these rocker arms go back in exactly the same position. Okay, they're actually designed. Do you see some of them are sitting at a slightly different angle? So they're actually designed to go in a particular place.
Okay, so we're gonna go maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe.
Okay, but which is the front of the engine?
Oh yeah, so.
So you probably start that side. You don't have to, but if you remember that you've numbered it backwards, then I guess that's okay. But generally, you would start at the front of the engine, just tradition. Okay. Now they do have part numbers on the side. When we take them off, we'll check those and we'll see whether the part numbers tell us which order they go in. But otherwise, we'll have to mark them. Also notice that it's very important that this pillar goes back at number 4, right, because it's got that hole in it. And you see here we've got this is a blanking cap, right? So when they drilled that hole, they needed some way of blocking it off again. So this one, we know that one's number 4, right? That's number 3, 2 and 1. Right, the other thing we're going to do, we need to take all of these, loosen all of these nuts. You see these are screws, and then there's a lock nut. And what we want to do, see some of these nuts have got burrs on them from when people have, their spanner has slipped when they've been trying to tighten them. So we'll get all those tidied up. But the most important thing is to make sure that the thread of both the nut and the screw is as good as we can have, right? Because that's going to help us to set the tappets more accurately when we come to doing it. So that's basically the job. We're going to go over to the vise in a minute, and we're going to try and knock out one of these pins, and then we're going to strip we're going to mark them, and then we're going to strip the rocker arm or valve train, I suppose the whole assembly is called. We're going to strip that down and get everything cleaned up and then put back together again. Okay?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we're over at the vase now, and what we've got is this V block. So it's an engineer's V block. It's not in the vase, it's just sitting on top. And now what we're going to do is we're going to hold that in there like that, and we're going to punch that, try and punch that pin out. We'll zoom in a minute so you can see what we're doing. Okay, now be careful, we don't want that hitting the vase, right? So we're going to move back. We also don't want to damage all the springs. There's a spring washer in the back here, okay?
Yeah.
So we don't want to damage that either. So we need to make sure that the V block is not resting on the spring. And then if you can turn it that way a little bit. Okay, no, too much, come back. Okay, no, up a bit. No. Turn. Just there. Okay. Now we're going to try and smack this pin out. Okay, it's going. Okay, we've hit the bottom of the V block now. Lift it up a bit. Okay, we've got to be careful. Don't know if that... Sadly that punch is too big, and this one is going to get caught in a minute. Yeah, it's now stuck. There we go. Right, let's just find a smaller punch. So we can see, if we turn it over, we can see that that pin is now coming out the other side, right?
Yeah.
So that's going well. Right, let's put it down for a second and we find a better punch. Okay, what I've got now is a very thin drift. I hope that it's going to not bend as we drive this pin out. The other thing we need to be careful of is when this comes out, obviously all these springs are under tension, so I'm hoping that the drift will go into the hole and stop it all from springing off. But to be certain, I'm putting my hand against the pin, against the cap, and my fingers locked on the back of this, well, basically on the second tappet or rocket cover, a rocker arm. Okay, now to me that feels like it's pretty much out. So we can see, we don't want it to come all the way out, or we don't need it to come all the way out, but we do want it to come off the shaft. Our drift is still loose.
So there's still tension on the...
So there's still tension on there, so we're going to go a little bit more. Oh, okay, that's come out now. Right. So obviously that spring tension is not enough to take that cap off.
Oh, I think Something's happened.
Find our pin.
Something's happened because that's expanded.
No, that was bigger.
Oh.
Okay, let's go over to the other workbench now. Okay, we're back at the workbench. So there's the little pin that we knocked out. So we can see, well, that's just a pin, right? And it needs to go back in there. Now, obviously this is under a bit more tension than I expected. I don't know if we're going to be able to just take it off or whether we're going to have to encourage it off. It feels like we may have to encourage it a bit. Okay, Oscar, can you put your hand there like that?
Okay.
I'm gonna fire it at you.
No!
No, you seriously need to put your hand there. I don't think it's working.
Try pulling that
It actually
up.
is working because I can no longer see through that hole.
Fire! I think we need a more powerful spring. Yay!
Okay, now, right, we've got number 2, we've got the post, we've got the cap, we've got the number 1, we've got a spring washer.
And a spring.
No, hang on. And then of course we've got the cap. So we do need to make sure that we remember how it goes together. The other thing is to check is so basically look for bushes inside here. Looks like there's a bush in that one. There will be, yeah, there you can see the bush inside the rocker arm. You see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like copper bronze bush essentially, copper coloured. Same with that one. In fact, this has got 2. Right, now Oscar, you mentioned about these little holes on top. Now do you see inside there, I'm hoping the camera can see this. Inside you can actually see, hopefully you can see there's 2 bronze bushes, and so what that does is it creates a groove in the center, and that hole connects with that groove, right?
Yeah.
So there's oil splashing around inside the tappet cover, and it obviously some of it will run down that hole and get into that groove and basically lubricate the bushes as well. So let's just lay these out as they came off, a little bit further over. We have marked them, so it's fine. Then we've got a spring, as you said. Number 3. Just lay the spring sideways, like that. Okay. And then we've got the next pillar, which we have marked. We've marked all the pillars on the back end. Okay. Then we've got number 4.
Be
And
careful.
another spring.
That spring is kind of supercharged.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, because number 5, do you see the bush has actually come out?
Oh.
Right, so the bush is on the shaft and not on the rocker. It's actually come out of there. So that's not great, but it's not the end of the world because obviously the springs keep it in place, so that's okay. And now we can see that those are what they call split bushes. You see there's actually that bush has been damaged. But yeah, there is a gap there. You can see how the bush opens and closes.
Yeah.
So that's what they call the split bush. Right, then we've got the third pillar, number 6. Another spring. I'm running out of camera space here. Okay, number 7. Then we got number 4 pillar, which is very now this one, you see, is actually locked onto the shaft as well, this lock nut, so we need to loosen that. Lock bolt, sorry. Okay, now I think you can see here, there we go. So we got this bolt that's basically locking this pillar onto the shaft, so we're going to loosen that. It is quite tight. He says. That does not want to come off. There we go. Right. That was very tight. This is a very interesting bolt. Look at that. It's got like a yeah, it's basically conical, right? And then it's got a conical washer as well, and you can see how that washer is serrated, and that's what stops it from loosening. Very interesting. And that basically screws, looks like it screws into the shaft. I've not seen that before. Yeah, look at that, it really does. Now what that does obviously is it makes sure that this feeder hole lines up with the feeder hole in the shaft. So that's why they've had to put that there. And then if you look on the shaft here, do you see all along here you've got these flattened area, and you've got a weep hole for the oil to come through. And you can see that's pretty much at every rocker. So we've got number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8.
Yeah.
Now this one, last one, should come off.
And leaving the bush behind.
And leaving the bush behind, which is a pain in the butt, but there we go. And then we have another spring washer.
And then the cap.
And the cap, and of course we could take the cap off and clean it, but we're not going to bother. We're just going to clean this all up. Look how dirty this thing is, even though it's been through the chemical bath just like everything else. But and that's why we're stripping it, right? So as to get all of that, and also to have a look at these bushes. Now, the good thing, from what I can tell just so far, ignoring those where the bushes come out, but let's just take, for example, number 7, and we put it on the shaft, and we bring it to where it would be, which is there.
It's left the bush.
It's left the bush. Okay. And there's very little play in there. They're not bad at all. So that's good. That's promising. I'm pleased about that. Right, so we're going to get all this cleaned up and get it ready to reassemble. We'll obviously check each bush as we go, and but yeah, the main thing is now to get it all cleaned up, and then we can get it reassembled, properly lubricated. But sorry, one other thing before we reassemble, what we are going to do is we're going to see these surfaces, right? if you run your finger over there, you'll feel there's a bit of a lip there where it's been touching on the...
I can see it.
You can see it, yeah?
Yeah.
So let's just bring it up to the camera, and I'm hoping the camera is going to pick it up. But you can see, well, hopefully you can see, but you can, I guess you can also imagine there is a flat surface where it's been hitting on the valve all the time. What we're going to do is basically very, very lightly sand that back to get a nice rounded profile. It's rounded this way, and at the moment it's kind of stepped in this direction. What we want to do is remove that step, but keep that nice round profile. So we're going to just use a very small grinding wheel on the hand grinder, and we're just going to tidy those up. This side you don't want to play with. These are hardened and you don't really want to touch that surface at all. We just want to get them clean. But we are going to remove these nuts, and the lock nuts and the screws, and make sure that the thread in the rocker, the screw and on the lock nut are all good, and we're going to deburr these nuts so that they are in good shape again. So we'll get all that sorted, and then we'll come back and reassemble. Okay, after quite a bit of effort, we've managed to clean all of this up. We've also stamped each of these. Hopefully you can see that on the camera. Just try and get it to zoom, to focus rather. So we've stamped the number on each of these. You've got the one there and then the one on the rocker arm, and each of them has been stamped all the way through. We decided to take the second end cap off because inside there was a load of crud, and it was just better to get all of that out. Obviously also this shaft is essentially hollow, and we wanted to make sure that we could get, I don't know if you can see that on the camera. Yeah, there you go, you see it. You can just see the light flashing through there. That doesn't want to do it. Anyway, that shaft is hollow, so again we wanted to get that all nicely cleaned up inside and polished. Now what we've found, we've come to a bit of a dead stop. The adjustment screw on this rocker, which is number 7, is damaged. Hopefully you can see the thread there. Let me try and get the camera to focus on that. But that thread is basically one whole thread missing, and as a result we can't actually get this screw out, and of course that thread is exactly where typically this thing will be trying to adjust anyway. So what we're going to have to do is basically get a new replacement screw, and cut that one off, because as it is at the moment we actually can't even get it out. All the others look fine, all the threads are good, all the surfaces are good, so I'm happy with all of those. And then the other thing that we've done on each of these is we've basically just with a mini grinder just resurfaced all of the lobes essentially, so that it's still got a nice round profile, but just taking out any of the essentially dents that were in there. So sadly we've gone now as far as we can with this. We now need to look around and get some parts, the main one being that replacement screw, and I'm going to have a look as well and just look into the bushes and see basically, you know, I believe they are available. I have seen them, but obviously we just need to look at availability and also make sure that there's enough, that the people that we speak to actually have enough, and obviously look at the cost as well. Sadly these parts are not available from Anglo, so we are going to have to look elsewhere. So look, I think that's as far as we can go on this video, unfortunately. We'll obviously spend this week now trying to source the parts and get them ordered and get them delivered, and then we will continue essentially with reassembling this rocker arm, and get it onto the tractor, get it onto the, get it bolted into the head. We can do an initial setting of the tappets just to make sure that they at least there or thereabouts once we get to start the engine. Obviously we'll reset them again once the engine has run for about 10 hours or so after we started it. One other thing that we've done, I've also just cleaned up there were burrs on these nuts. Just basically cleaned all of those up, cleaned up each of the faces on every nut as well, just to make sure that the spanner will fit nice and square on those as well. Yeah, and I think that's basically it. So look, I hope you all have a good week, and we'll see you on the next video. Cheers for now.
Bye.